It was early spring of 1858 when the wagon first appeared on the horizon of Cedar Hollow, a settlement hidden deep in the Missouri Ozarks. The day had been still, the sky an even gray, when the faint creak of wheels broke the quiet. Folks thought it was a trader coming through, until they saw the mule. Its ribs showed, its eyes glassy with exhaustion. The reins dangled loose. There was no driver. The wagon rolled slowly into town, as though some invisible hand guided it, then stopped in front of the general store. The mule dropped to its knees and died right there. Sheriff Amos Harlan, a tall man with sunburnt cheeks and a calm voice, stepped forward. He pulled open the wagon door. The wood groaned. Inside was nothing. Not food, not tools, not bodies. Only a faint metallic scent that made his stomach twist. He lifted his lantern higher and saw a handprint, dried blood, smeared on the inner rail. Amos ordered the townsfolk back. He examined the wagon carefully, tracing the wheel ruts back along the trail that led west. Strangely, they faded just beyond the last cabin, as though the wagon had materialized out of thin air. That evening, Amos sat at his table with his wife Sarah, trying to make sense of it. "Wagons don't drive themselves," he muttered. Sarah, stirring the fire, said softly, "Maybe something, or someone, brought it home." Her words lingered. Amos had seen strange things in his life, but never a wagon without a driver that smelled faintly of death. That night, even the crickets were quiet. By dawn, word spread that the wagon belonged to Elias Whitlock, a farmer who had set out with his wife Mary and their two children, Thomas and Lila, on the Ozark Trail 2 weeks earlier. They were heading north to start anew. Amos found the Whitlock name carved faintly on the wagon's tongue. Beneath the floorboards, hidden in a crack, was a small child's shoe. Brown leather, heel darkened with dried blood. He felt something sink in his chest. He called for a search party. "We're finding that family," he said, "dead or alive." Before the party set out, a stranger arrived, tall, rough-bearded, eyes like winter. His name was Jonas Clay, a trapper who had been roaming the Ozark woods. He claimed he'd seen the Whitlocks days earlier. "They had a boy," Jonas said. "Liked to play the fiddle while his pa drove." Jonas told Amos he'd camped near them one night. At dawn, he saw a man in a dark coat by their fire, but the Whitlocks told him no one else was traveling with them. The next morning, Jonas said, the stranger was gone. And so was the boy's fiddle music. The search began. Amos, Jonas, and 4 others followed the trail south, deep into the Ozark forest where sunlight barely touched the ground. They found broken branches, horse tracks, and wagon ruts that veered off into the trees. Hours in, Jonas stopped. "Listen," he whispered. The wind rustled through the pines. But there was another sound too. Faint, fragile. A single violin note carried through the air before fading away. Amos's blood ran cold. They pressed on, until Jonas pointed to a thorn bush. Caught among its branches was a snapped fiddle string. Amos pocketed it without a word. By late afternoon, one of the men, young Billy Crane, knelt by the trail. "Sheriff," he said shakily, "you'd better see this." Amos crouched beside him and saw it. A streak of blood, still dark, running across the dirt. They followed the blood deeper into the forest, where the trees thickened and the smell of iron grew heavy. They found a half-burned sack, a child's wooden toy, and a woman's bonnet, torn and dirt-stained. The trail ended in a clearing. There was no sign of life, no footprints leaving it. Only a bloody handprint smeared across the trunk of an oak, the same shape as the one on the wagon. A storm hit that evening. The searchers took shelter beneath a rock ledge as thunder rolled and rain lashed the earth. Amos tried to stay awake, listening to the storm. Then, through the wind, he heard it. A child's laughter. He sat upright. It was faint, echoing from the trees. Jonas's eyes went wide. "You heard that too," he whispered. "The Whitlock boy," Amos said, standing. "He's calling for help." Lightning flashed, and for an instant, Amos thought he saw a small figure standing by a tree, watching them. But when the light faded, there was nothing. When the storm passed and the men returned to town, the wagon that had been parked by the sheriff's office was gone. Its wheel tracks led toward the riverbank, as though it had rolled off on its own. The townsfolk followed, lanterns flickering in the dark. They found it by the bridge, standing still, its frame wet from rain, the door half open. Inside, something new lay on the floorboards, a small folded paper, soaked around the edges but still readable. Amos opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike. "If you find this wagon, tell Mama I kept playing. Tell Papa not to stop. Thomas Whitlock, age 9. A hush fell over everyone. Sarah Harlan, who had followed Amos to the river, began to cry quietly. Jonas removed his hat. "That boy's spirit ain't gone," he said. "It's trying to be heard." Determined to uncover the truth, Amos and Jonas followed the wagon's tracks along the river the next morning. The trail led to a sharp bend where the current slowed. There, half buried in silt, they found a burned wagon wheel, charred and warped. Jonas knelt beside it. "There was a fire that night," he murmured. Amos stepped into the shallows and felt something cold under his boot. He reached down and pulled out a gold locket engraved with E.W. inside were tiny portraits: Elias, Mary, Thomas, and Lila Whitlock. The faces smiled, frozen forever in paint. That night, Sarah woke gasping from a dream. She told Amos she'd seen a young boy with a fiddle standing by their bed. His face was sad, his eyes bright. He said, "Tell Papa to forgive himself," she whispered. Amos felt a chill crawl up his neck. "Forgive himself?" "Yes," she said, "like he's trapped by his own sin." Amos knew then that this wasn't just about death. It was about redemption. At dusk the next day, a man in a black coat rode into Cedar Hollow. His eyes were hollow, his voice soft. "I heard there's a wagon here," he said. "Belonged to the Whitlocks." Amos stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man removed his hat. "Name's Gideon. I traveled with Elias, until the night everything went wrong." He told a story that made the crowd shiver, how Elias accused him of theft during a storm. A gun went off. Elias's wife, Mary, fell, struck by her husband's bullet. In panic, Elias tried to save his children as the wagon caught fire. Gideon ran. When he turned back, all he saw were flames and blood. Gideon said he thought they all died. But days later, he saw something impossible. The Whitlock's wagon rolling through the woods, no driver, no horses, just moving, steady and silent. He followed it until it vanished into the fog. "Whatever's driving that wagon," Gideon said, voice trembling, "ain't living." The crowd murmured. Amos said nothing, but he noticed Gideon's hands, both scarred, burned. Proof enough of fire and regret. Amos sat alone with the wagon that night, the rain tapping gently on the roof. He touched the blood-stained rail and whispered, "If you can hear me, Elias, let them rest." The lantern flickered and the wagon creaked softly, as if answering. Then suddenly, the flame went out, plunging the sheriff into darkness. He sat there, heart pounding, realizing this wasn't a haunting. It was a plea for forgiveness. A week later, a letter arrived from Springfield. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "I did it. I killed them. I didn't mean to. I can't rest. The wagon follows me. Every time I run, it finds me. I see their faces in the dark. Elias Whitlock." Amos folded the paper slowly. The blood trail wasn't the wagon's curse. It was Elias's guilt, dragging behind him. Amos and Jonas rode out to find him. For 3 days they followed a faint trail of blood spots and boot prints through the Ozarks. On the third morning they found Elias, alive, barely, lying in the dirt, his clothes torn, his eyes sunken. "It won't stop," Elias rasped. "It keeps coming for me." When Amos looked back along the trail, his breath caught. There were fresh wagon tracks behind them, but no wagon in sight. That night, they made camp. The air was still. Elias sat by the fire, trembling. "I hear them in the woods," he said. "Thomas playing the fiddle. Mary calling my name. I tried to bury them, Sheriff." I couldn't dig deep enough. Amos was about to speak when Jonas froze, staring into the trees. The wagon rolled out of the darkness, silent, empty. Elias began to weep. "They've come for me." Elias rose shakily, stepping toward it. Amos tried to hold him back. "You don't have to." "Yes," Elias said softly. "I do." "They've waited long enough." He climbed into the wagon. The mules appeared, thin, ghostly, and the wagon began to move. As it rolled away, a faint tune drifted from the forest. Thomas's fiddle. The sound wasn't mournful. It was gentle, forgiving. At sunrise, Amos and Jonas followed the trail one last time. It ended at a river clearing. The wagon stood still, empty once more. Beside it, Elias Whitlock lay motionless, his face calm. In his hand was the child's shoe. 3 wooden crosses had been carved into the nearest tree. 1 large, 2 small. No blood, no fear, just stillness. Years later, travelers spoke of a ghostly wagon seen rolling along the Ozark Trail on misty nights, driverless, silent, leaving no tracks. But old Sheriff Amos, gray-haired and gentle, would visit the clearing each spring. He'd leave fresh flowers by the crosses, whispering prayers for peace. When townsfolk asked him why, he always said, "Because even an empty wagon can carry love, if it knows where home is." And so, the legend of the wagon that arrived empty, yet left a blood trail, lived on, not as a tale of horror, but as one of guilt, forgiveness, and eternal love.